So hello guys and welcome back. Today what I would like us to do is basically wrap up these parts here, and then I would like us to really not waste so much time and just jump in and start building these projects that I also feel would probably be the most interesting aspects for you. And because of that, I actually have decided to get rid of this part because I think we would probably have to touch this anyways when we are building when we are building our app. So I'm just going to get rid of this because either ways we're going to work with databases when we get to this point. So we'll decide to work with ORMs in some cases, and in some cases we can just go ahead and write pure SQL statements. That should not be a problem. Anyway, so that's where we are right now. Would cover again. We've touched up on middlewares and filters, but I'm just gonna say a few things about them, and then I can tell you how we can actually integrate with external APIs, and then I'll do a little bit of an introduction to WebAssembly. So in case you would want to know how to get started with this, or you wonder more or less how you could get started with this, or what you could do with this, and we'll talk a little bit about this, and then I can also talk to you a little bit about serverless functions. I already did some videos in the past, but I'm also just going to go ahead and reiterate on those, and also of course leave you links to those much more detailed videos so you can leverage more how you can work with serverless functions within the AWS ecosystem, within the Azure ecosystem. Doesn't really matter. I already covered those in the past, so I would like to share those with you as well. So moving on, I've come over to our main function, and if you remember before, we had in the last video we talked about how we could actually deploy to Shoto RS. But anyways, I've gone ahead to I'm just gonna collapse this part. I've gone ahead to clean things up a little bit. I'm just for now just sticking with Actix because again, in the end, I might want to deploy this as a Docker container to another platform. It doesn't have to be Shuttle. So I showed you that video to show you that's more or less to bring it to your notice that there is something called Shuttle RS, and also show you how you could possibly deploy an app over there. But now I would also in the end want to deploy this as a Docker container to a different cloud, and we can also check that out to see how it works in the end. So that's also why I've cleaned things out down here. And the next thing I've also done is to, if you look at our app state, for example, I'm just going to show you that real quick. So if we go to our app state, so this NATS clients have actually made this optional. And the point is, I wouldn't want our app to simply just crash, for example, when we're not able to establish a connection. So we are not able to do that. I think it makes more sense that the whole app just dies more or less or crashes, but we can basically put those functionalities on hold more or less. So that's also what I've done over here. So now if you look here, I'm not only doing unwrap anymore, but now I'm actually just handling the connection. So when it actually goes through, then of course I take a copy of the client we already established, and then I spawn off these tasks. But when that's not, and of course I'm now returning this now as an optional parameter. But when that's not the case, I just return none. And this is also what I pass down here into an app state. So either way, this is going to be the case. The good thing is if you look to our handler and look to this nuts handler, now this would make more sense to you. So I have also had to modify this a little bit. So when we have this nuts client, when we are actually able to make this connection initially when the server was started up, then we can actually use this more or less to send our message. But when that's not the case, when that's not the case, that's the first condition here. Then we use, of course, the channel we created. But when we do have a client, we when we were able to establish a connection, then of course we go ahead and then just publish to this topic. So that's one way we can actually make use of both and not just one. So if this is always fine, then of course it's fine. But when not, our channel would be like a backup option more or less. So that's some of the modifications I've had to make. And also, if you look over here in the test case, I've also done the same. So here I'm simply just passing none as on as client. The same reasons being that when I, for example, deploy this to say GitHub or wherever, and I already have some pipeline set up to run my tests, it will definitely happen that I will not have a NATS client, of course, running within GitHub to help me test my on my app. So for that, I'm just more or less taking that part out, and that way our test should still go through. So I can still say cargo tests, and this should still work totally fine regardless, because this part would not affect us anyways. So that's some of the modifications I already made. So if you look down here now, you can see that our tests all still pass regardless. So what I can do is I can also start an ad server locally, and again, enable all these parts, and then of course pass the NAS clients in here. Is still going to go through. But again, the main reason why I'm taking this out from the tests is because when we run this on say GitHub pipeline, and we don't have the NAS clients somehow, which probably would be the case, not running somewhere, then this is going to fail. So that's really what the thought process is. So these are some of the subtle but quite impactful modifications I think we have to make to actually bring our app to where we want it to be. And again, one thing I also wanted to show you is that, so where we have all these tasks spawn off here, we also have the option to actually, that's already what I did here. We also have the option to actually bring all of this into a vector more or less, and then we can actually, what we can now do is to run all of them together like this. So but the only issue that we might have is that this part is actually a block. As why I left this comment, is actually a blocking operation more or less. So if we should run this, what it means is that this code would execute to get to this point and never actually finish. And what it will even mean is that we can't even get our server up. So the another option, of course, would be to take this client, bring it down here, and actually use the try join from Actix to now have maybe these 4 tasks here plus the server itself 5. So we can actually just start 5 async tasks and join them all together, and of course everything should still be fine. So I just wanted to quickly show you that. And of course, don't mind these errors, is because I have all these columns. I cannot take all of them out, and we should be fine. As you can see, this is totally fine. But again, remember what I said, this part is actually a blocking piece of code. So because these tasks are not like a one-off async functions, they mostly run infinitely. What it means is that the code would never ever leave this point, and your server would never be up. So again, you can take all of this out, this whole creation out here, and then down here, what we can actually do is we can say something like, let's server would be equal to this. Now I'm just gonna take this part out actually. So I terminate it here. And what I can now do, of course, is return just OK. And so what I can now do, of course, is now take this server and then also bring these guys down here at the bottom, and then add this again as one of the tasks in that list, and then everything should still be fine. So that's one way you can actually take care of that. I just had to show you that anyways. So I'm going to revert all of this. I'm going to leave that for you. Should you want to bring that into your app, that would be a decision you have to take for yourself. So now let's proceed with the other things we would like to talk about today. I already showed you in the past about middlewares, and we also actually wrote one of ours. So if you remember, we actually wrote this auth middleware. So one thing that I did is, because if you, for example, look here, when you set up a server, at least with Actix Web, and you have a set of middlewares all attached, what it means is that for every of the services that you define here, they are all gonna be like the incoming request will have to go through all these middlewares before it gets to that request. And what it means is that if we have, for example, our auth middleware here, even our public endpoints would have to deal with it, because again, the request would have to proceed in this order before it gets to this of our public endpoints. And if you look into our public services, we have things like login. I don't expect you to be authenticated while you are still trying to log in. Maybe register, yes, of course, also for register as well. And so that's why I that's where you have the distinction between working with middlewares and with filters. So if I come to our middleware, what I already did like a quick fix. So what I did was I came here and I said, so if our path starts with public. So if it is a public endpoint, then of course we are simply just going to return and of course proceed to the next request. But when that's not the case, then the whole setup, the whole definition we have of our authentication middleware will still take effect. So what this happens now is that for every public endpoint, this will definitely get through. So this is one way we are still using our middleware, but like I said, you could actually do where you can draw the distinction between working with middlewares and filters would now be middle. You can attach middleware, sorry, filters specifically to a service, and then you can decide what happens in that service. Again, this is one way. If you remember, also we talked about guards, and I can maybe try to find where we did define it. So here we also defined a guard, and of course it always requires this check function where you implement the guard for your threads. So again, we have the option here to actually do more work here even. So we can, instead of, we can even use this as you can actually, of course, the opportunities are limitless. You can actually implement this as a middleware in the end, where we actually use it to, because at this point we have access to this authorization token in the header, and we can even take it out from here, process it, whatever we want to do, and then again do more or less exactly what we actually did here in our auth. So if you remember here, we are getting the middleware, we are removing the bearer part, and then again we are decoding it somewhere here. Again, this is a function we wrote. If you remember, I'm hoping you haven't. If you have, of course, please go back and look through our video series and try to remember when we actually tried to decode a JWT token, which we are also signing in this or we also signed in this tutorial. So the point is you have this flexibility to actually secure your app in more ways than one, and you can also, of course, specify this to like services. So again, with the guards, we also have the options, for example, to say, I don't know, let's say we are actually expecting certain headers for certain services. We also have the option to apply these guards to those services, and of course, check those keys, verify them before we actually get through to the request. There's so much more we could do. Again, go back to the video we did until now. We already explained how you can work with all of these things, including these guards. We also had to attach them somewhere. I can also trying to find that out. So if you look here, we already have it here. So this is actually how you can scope this again to certain services if you would, and again add as much layer and like be able to add like really granular details as how you control who have access to what in your app. So that's really one interesting thing I would like you to go back and revisit. Again, we already talked about this in the past, so please feel free to go back, watch the videos that we did until now to understand what we've done so far. Okay, so let's moving on. So when it comes to integration with external APIs, there is actually one interesting crate that it's more or less the go-to crate when you would want to, of course, have your Actix Web interface or the APIs to maybe either send or receive data, doesn't really matter. So this AWC package, this crate more or less is mostly the go-to crate, especially within the Actix ecosystem as well. But it's not, of course, limited to this crate. You can, of course, use the other popular ones, for example, like requests, like this one. I don't know the current version, but it's not anyways limited to this AWC crate. Doesn't really have to be it actually, but just showing you or more or less calling your attention to it, just so you're aware that you can, of course, easily integrate this into your app. If you'd want to, of course, interface other APIs, this should not be so much of a problem. But of course, based on the definition for those APIs, you can easily match those definitions, the security postures, whatever it is with any of these crates. You should still be able to seamlessly interface your own API. So this should not be a problem, regardless of the crate you choose to use in the end. Just letting you know, make more or less making you aware of this. The AWS crate is actually called Actix Web Client. And that's actually the full name because it promises to be an async HTTP and WebSocket client library. So going beyond just interfacing other APIs, there is actually much more you could do with this. So, which of course happens to be the reason why I'm calling your attention to this. Again, if it's just interfacing APIs, the other pack crates you already have in Rust can do the job. But just calling your attention to this active web crate, active web clients rather, Actix Web client. So with WebAssembly, this can just be thought of, say, as binary instruction formats, more or less, that allows code written in languages like, say, C, Rust, C++, to actually run in the web browser and other environments. So, of course, within Actis, there is also the possibility and the support, more or less, to serve and execute WebAssembly modules. But beyond Actis, of course, um, WebAssembly can comfortably run in most modern browsers. So this also makes it, of course, a lot more interesting for us for Rust developers, or not just Rust developers now, but even say um, other like developers, say of C, of C++, or even Go, for example, to actually still write WebAssembly. So you can actually stick to the language you're already most comfortable with, and which also offers you a lot of all these benefits that Rust, for example, offers you. And then you also have the option to now compile this to WebAssembly, and then also bring the speed to the web. So this is also like a really quite interesting and fascinating topic for me, as at least. And that's also why I needed to, of course, tell you about this. Again, the point would be, I this would really be like a complete tutorial series themselves if we start talking about WebAssembly. But I just felt it's actually made a lot of sense to actually bring your notice to this. I just want you to be aware of it, more or less, so you understand that something like this actually does exist, and you can do actually amazing things when it comes to WebAssembly and Rust. Um, I think this series, I would like us to just conclude it, and then we know that when next we meet, would really just dive deeper into building more interesting projects. So not just I needed to, of course, use the initial these parts of the video to more or less kind of like introduce you to Rust, how you can actually work with Rust, say if you're a backend developer or wanting to be, and how you can actually use this to say build up quite interesting and of course a production grade backend application. And so the point was that when we complete this walkthrough, more or less, if you look over here, one of the projects we would like to cover was actually this backend Rust as a backend server. So the point for me was actually just to take the time, gradually build up the whole thing, not just sorry, not dumping the whole thing on you, but also like walk you through how we actually got to where we are. So we built the whole thing from ground up, making small changes, small increments, and then getting to where we are right now. I'm sorry, and where we are right now have helped us more or less to be able to achieve these projects right here. So that was actually what I had in mind when we got started. And of course, I've talked to you about middlewares, and I've talked to you about how we can, of course, interface with other external APIs. And we already started talking about WebAssembly. So I think, again, like I said before, I don't think I would be able to do it justice just to try to talk to you about WebAssembly in this video, because it would need like a lot more time to actually sit down and have this conversation. But one cool thing I would want to do is, of course, introduce you to this quite interesting book. So this is really going to walk you through how you can get started, what it actually means, working with Rust and WebAssembly. There's actually a lot of resources in here. So it's gonna tell you about setup, for example, what you need and all that. And apart from that, it will also introduce you to like important crates you should know. And of course, you look at in the end, he also talks about how you can actually deploy this to production. And also there are some templates. If I can find them, there should be some project templates. So if you look at, there are already some templates you can actually more or less use to get started. The interesting one for me, of course, is this with Webpack, because it's also batteries included. If you look over here, you almost have, it's also here written actually, but it has everything you need to actually get started working with WebAssembly and Rust, and you don't have to really worry about how you have to do all this setup. That's could help you more or less to actually compile your code in the end to what's understandable with the browser. This already has been done for you. All you have to do is actually just start writing your code. So this is actually quite interesting. I would really recommend this book. And of course, maybe if someone in the future feels like, oh, we should really have a look at this, we should talk about this on this channel. Of course, that's what I'm here. Would of course plan according to our schedule, and then we talk about this. So that's really what I wanted to quickly show you. Again, like I said, we can't talk about this in this video because we need a lot more time to actually just talk about assembly. But again, I think it would make sense to, in case you don't already know about this, to call your attention to this. Quite, I find it actually, I quite find it fascinating, and I also hope you, I also think you could actually find it fascinating as well. And of course, regarding serverless function, I already did like a quite comprehensive, actually two comprehensive videos in the past. Again, I'm going to add the link in the description in this video so you can go check them out. In those videos, we deployed like serverless Rust functions to the Azure cloud as well as to the Microsoft, to the Amazon cloud. And then we, of course, I walked you through more or less in those videos how we can go from setup to defining like the main runtime function, to the deployments, and of course to testing as well. So these are things I would, of course, implore you to check them out if you, in some point, would find yourself having to do things like this, save just for fun, or maybe at your workplace. Just feel free to check those out. They would be as detailed. They are as detailed as possible. And again, of course, feel free to leave questions, or maybe some things you need clarified. And I will, of course, I will feel free to always revisit those topics and clarify and answer your questions. Anyway, guys, that's all for this video. It was quite a quick, short one. So when next we meet, we would have to take. We probably would actually start with this chat server as our first full, like, real project, and then we can of course work ourselves down this list. And again, maybe this is not an exhaustive list. Like I told you, again, I have plans to add things to this list, but of course these are going to come like in an irregular time intervals in the future. But be rest assured that all these topics will be covered. Anyway, guys, that will be all for now, and get ready for the next video, because now would actually I'm guessing this is what you've mostly been waiting for. So of course, without further ado, we'll jump right in and we'll start covering all these topics. So, but guys, that will be all, and I hope to see you in the next video. And until next time, have a lovely weekend, and bye bye.